Let's check in with Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine.
Air defense was working. Still, injuries and death within the past 24 hours. And yet another sleepless night here in Ukraine.
Joe. Little fucking Joe Lindsley.
Joe Lindsley is quickly becoming an American treasure in broadcasting.
Welcome to Ukraine Bank.
This morning, Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, experienced one of the largest Russian strikes in the city in weeks. Let's go to Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine for more on that. Joe, you're in Kharkiv, aren't you?
Indeed, Bob. Great to talk with you again. It was a sleepless night through much of Ukraine as Russian missiles were dancing throughout the country, starting at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And the missiles were maneuvering far and wide, going toward different regions and then changing course. And then all about the same time, in a very sinister way, around 4 o'clock in the morning, all those different missiles moving around began to turn toward Kyiv and to concentrate on the city. And everyone there knew what was happening. These missiles were coming to them. It seems that anywhere between 29 and 31 Russian missiles, including at least 2 hypersonic missiles, which are incredibly destructive and hard to shoot down, hit the city in just over an hour. And so it had 2 effects. It kept the whole country awake because these missiles were moving around everywhere. No one knew where they were going until the last minute. And it was a massive pummeling of the city of Kyiv. And authorities say, Ukrainians say that all the Russian missiles were shot down. But as always, they were shot down before they hit their targets. But when they are shot down, there's still significant damage as the debris falls. There are fires and significant damage from shockwaves. And here in Kharkiv, the attacks these past 24 hours began around midday. Yesterday, when I was reporting and speaking with Wendy, I was taking a walk in a park in Kharkiv. We were under air raid alerts. We had just had an explosion in the city, and there were clouds of smoke billowing all around. Even despite that, there were people in the park and going about their work and their daily lives. But we found out soon after I finished speaking with you on WGN yesterday that what had happened, the Russians sent a missile to a printing press where people were working. Several people were killed. People were missing in the rubble, and many people were injured. There was a woman was interviewed, and she said her mother called her from the rubble and said, "Forgive me for everything." Those were her last words. She died in the rubble while she was at work at a printing press. And yet, you see, despite a country that, barely slept early this morning, both Kyiv and Kharkiv and cities around the country are back to life, sort of indomitable spirits. But what we also had in Kharkiv last night, as this latest Russian show was beginning, around 11 p.m., an Iskander missile hit the city of Kharkiv, and those missiles travel at about 3,700 to 5,000 miles per hour. So you have no warning, and that's exactly what happened here. And then about an hour later, at about 12:30 in the morning, we got the reports that there's always a very chilling report to receive that 6 Russian bombers had taken off and they were making their way for the Caspian Sea, which is a common launch point to attack Ukraine. By about 1 o'clock in the morning, there were 11 Russian bombers in the air. And then soon after, there were a couple MiGs, which are capable of carrying those Kinzhal hypersonic missiles. And then at 3 o'clock in the morning is when these missiles were launched. And soon after, that attack began on Kyiv. And just after 5 o'clock this morning, the U.S. ambassador in Kyiv, Bridget Brink, she was there through it. She's very brave and stays at her post through this whole time. And she said, since 3:18 local time, Russia has been launching missiles and rockets across Ukraine's sovereign territory with no regard for civilians. I heard from a woman in Kyiv who was describing looking out her window, and she saw a Russian-Iranian suicide drone flying by her window. I mean, you're in a high-rise in Kyiv and you have Star Wars going on all around you and outside. Absolutely terrifying. And the British ambassador also in Kyiv during that attack, Martin Harris, he said Russia launched another mass attack on Kyiv. This is on X. He said the response of the city's air defenders and emergency services was heroic. downing 31 missiles and deploying across the city to treat the injured. And then the ambassador continued, these defenders are the soldiers of Kyiv's patron saint, St. Michael, who protects the city from evil. And that's pretty astounding coming from a Western diplomat until you realize that this is someone who is living through these hellish attacks like every other citizen of Kyiv. The BBC headline today was large missile attack targets Ukrainian capital, of course, making this sound like it was some kind of tornado or natural disaster. But in reality, this was a Russian attack, massive waves of missiles to Kyiv. And it had indeed been 44 days since such an attack. So perhaps, it seems the Russians were storing up for this moment last night, which comes as the same day, earlier in the day, Jake Sullivan, U.S. National Security Advisor, had been in Kyiv. We don't know if he was still there, probably not, during this attack.
Now, Joseph, as you know, too many Americans have become numb to the news of the war in Ukraine. And I wonder, after 2 years there, do you ever get complacent? It's a harrowing existence for everyone there, as you describe.
Yeah, there was a good sense of apprehension last night because it had been a while since major attacks, including on Kharkiv. There have been sporadic missiles hitting here. But no, you don't get complacent, but people get tired, and often the tiredness determines your level of alarm. If you're so extremely tired, you say, maybe I don't need to go to the shelter. That does happen. But I think I definitely got the sense that last night, you could tell because people were texting and emailing each other throughout the country. So many people were awake through the night. And so, no, I wouldn't say complacency, but exhaustion for sure. And then it's amazing that people show up. I go to my coffee shop right when they open, and there's no excuses. Everyone gets to work. Yesterday there was some frustration with this visit by Jake Sullivan. He met with Zelensky's top advisor, and he said in his statement, Jake Sullivan, "You should believe in the United States. We have provided enormous support, and we will continue to do so every day in every way we know how." That language is very different from the language of President Macron a couple of weeks ago of France. Macron acknowledged that a personal transformation. He said he used to believe in Ukraine less. He said 2 years ago, we refused to send you X, Y, and Z materials. And then over time, you've proven yourselves and we've changed our vocabulary. He said we need to stop speaking with the vocabulary of limits. We don't see this type of sea change mentality from the United States. We see, United States say, we've done a lot for you. We're going to try to do more. But there's deep and widespread frustration, especially in that sleepless night because of those attacks. There's not leadership from Washington, on saying we're going to actually send long-range missiles. The F-16s, the fighter jets still seem like a far-off mirage. We hear that there might be a few here by next summer. And this is perhaps why, you see the those Republicans who are opposing more money for Ukraine, maybe they also don't see that clear leadership. And as Garry Kasparov, one of the few prominent Russian dissidents who lives in exile, the chess grandmaster, he said, it kind of in jest, he said, F-16s can be used here, but not there. Weapons for Ukraine can have this or that range only. This self-limiting theater goes on while Ukrainians are murdered and Putin keeps escalating. It's a joke. Russia isn't limiting itself. It's a war, and you either win or lose. And that really is the feeling, I think, of most people around this country. Meanwhile, the Kingdom of the Netherlands said that when there are F-16s here, they will pay for the missiles, for the air-to-ground missiles. And the Czech government and the Czech president, who's a former NATO general, is moving very quickly to get more ammunition to Ukraine. So some hopeful signs. Air defense was working. Still, injuries and death within the past 24 hours. And yet another sleepless night here in Ukraine.
Must be great comfort when you do go to your coffee shop and you see other people there, as you say, going about their normal life, whatever normal is there. Still, after 2 years, and you can go anytime you want, but you won't, and you don't. I don't know how you do it, Joseph.
Well, that's part of it. Is the you walk into your regular coffee shop, and they remember your order, and they smile, and no one's complaining. Little things like that give everyone collective courage and energy. So thank you, Bob. Good to talk with you again.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Що сказав?
Well, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні,
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
на чиїй ти стороні.
Єбать.